All right, today we're not reading a special thing. We're reading the other mistake made by humanity. Not one of those Pokemon ones. It's called Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 is a wonderful game. I love that game. No one else should love it, but everyone should love it. It's the best game ever. I'm going to tell you why over the next however long it takes me to tell you about it. And I'm going to go in the order I played the campaigns in because there's 4 campaigns and the game's like 20 hours long if you don't do all the extra crap. But anyway, Chapter 1, Leon's story. You would pick Leon because he's the best. Anyway, Resident Evil 6 starts. You shoot the president in the face. President's dead. Leon goes, I shot the president. And then they tell him to leave the campus because zombies. And he pairs up with Helena, who's a fat ass. And she does stuff. And yeah, but anyway, that's your co op partner, Helena. And then immediately Leon gets confronted by like an old man. He's like, you gotta find my daughter. So this is the second daughter he goes after. And then that old man and that daughter become zombies and they get shoot. You go through the university. Not much really happens actually in the university, but you go through it. Then Leon gets in a police car. He drives about 5 feet, 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, something like that. Does a million flips, explodes. Then they just leave. Anyway, they go some train tunnel, go through the city, and then they get to a gun shop because Resident Evil and Leon do the same thing every single game. But anyway, they go to the gun shop, and a bunch of people are like, "We gotta save the gun shop," and then they board up the gun shop and shoot zombies, and then a school bus shows up, and they get in the school bus and they drive away. Then the school bus. Helena's a part of this all the way, and Hunnigan's there too. Hunnigan. It doesn't matter. She's there. She's talking to Leon and being watched by this one guy. Anyway, so they drive the school bus, and then the bus driver hits a fat person, and then they keep driving. And then they see another zombie. He's like, hold on. And he hits this one zombie. It's not a fat zombie, it's just a zombie. And they go careening and get stuck on the side of a cliff. And then a semi truck, because this is Leon, hits the bus and it goes off a cliff. And everyone except the bus driver, Leon, and Helena die. And then they get out and the bus driver and the bus explode. And then they go to a church. Then they start going through a graveyard and get attacked by lightning zombies. And the lightning zombies are like raw. And then they go to a church full of survivors after solving, I think, a puzzle or something. I forget. Ancient ruins. Anyway, they go to the church. There's a bunch of survivors. And then for about an hour, you solve puzzles in the church, including statues shooting crossbow bolts and I think laser beams. Something like that. Anyway, then you put little statues on pedestals and the door opens. And then when the door opens, a boob zombie comes out. It's not a zombie with boobs, it's a zombie made of boobs. And the boobs fart deadly gas. And thanks to Leon and Helena, I farted. Thanks to Leon and Helena, all these survivors die because they do. So anyway, they go under the church because they got nothing better to do where the boob zombie came from. And they find VHS tapes because this was, I don't remember what year this game took. 2013, I think. That's what the wiki says. I'm just this game has so many plots. It doesn't matter. 2013 VHS tapes, and then uh, they're like messing with Ada Wong's or something. I'll get back to this later, but they're messing with Ada Wong's, and Helena's sister is being filmed or something, and then uh, she turns into a zombie with boobs instead of a boob zombie, and they fight. They fight 300 feet down, 30 stories down from the church in the ancient ruins where the Vikings live for some reason, and then they keep going down and go down on a minecart in the ancient ruins under the church and something, and then they go underwater and fight a giant shark because they do. And while they're fighting the giant shark, they go down a slide that's 300,000 feet. They go basically 300,000 feet down, go down a slide while fighting a shark, and there's explosive barrels. And then after the shark explodes and dies, they fall above ground, and they go, "We got to go to China." So then they get on a plane. They don't show them getting on the plane. They get on a plane, and then the plane is infected with boob zombies, and they have to save the plane. Like, I don't know how they're not infected, but they have to save the plane, and the plane is crashing because of the boob zombie. So Leon flies the plane, and in the process, he crashes into China about an hour after they leave America, and he destroys about 50 blocks of China while crashing the plane. And then there's walking on the street. They don't get out of the plane. They're just walking, and Dante and Sherry Birkin's there, and she looks kind of like Ashley from Resident Evil 4, but she's not. And they're fighting something that looks like Dennis the Menace, but as Nemesis. And they fight him with a bus and a crane and stuff, and then they just leave, I think. And then they see Ada, so Leon and Helena chase her, and then he meets up with Chris Redfield, and Piers. We'll get to them later. Uh, and then they chase Ada, and she traps them in a room with explosive Roombas, and they go, "We'll get you, Ada." And she goes, "No," and then she leaves, and they go, "Damn." So then uh, Leon, I think he goes to a market. This might be out of order, but I think he goes to a market, like a market that's infested. But these infested are not the same. They're weird things that split into multiple things, and so they start throwing hands in microwaves and boiling pieces of them, and then they go through the market, and then Leon gets in a helicopter with Helena. Wait a minute. Yeah, and then Helena and then Leon. The pilot's a zombie, so Leon pilots the helicopter. So while doing 50 flips through the air, he crashes the helicopter into a building and it explodes. And then they walk away from it, and they go like upstairs of a building or something. And then they get to more China, and Chris calls Leon, and he goes, "Don't be there, even though you're there." And he goes, "Why?" And then China gets the coronavirus, or the C virus, I'm sorry. So then, in response to this, Leon and Helena get in a Humvee and drive around town with this guy, and then that's it. So then you get on a train, or you something. You get saved by Ada, who's in a helicopter or something, but you get on a train, And while on the train, you fight Senator Man, who was the bad man looking at Hunnigan earlier, and he's like, "You're stupid. I'm gonna beat you." And then he transforms into a dog that shoots bones. And so you fight him while riding the train, and then that's kind of it. So then you just keep going, and then you get to a plaza, and then the Senator Man shows up. He's like, "I hate you," and then he turns into a T Rex, and then a Humvee does a sick jump off of like a gas truck, and starts shooting him, and you shoot him, and then he hits the guy in Humvee, and it explodes, and then you get in an elevator. After Ada shoots it with a shoots the big man with the helicopter, and then the elevator explodes because Leon and Helena are in it. So then they save Ada from the beefy man by fighting him across on a different building because there's like 50 buildings exploding at this point. And then you go to the roof, and now the beefy man that was a T Rex dog has transformed into a giant fly. And the giant fly needs to be beat, so they shove lightning rods in it so that he'll explode with lightning. And then Ada leaves Leon an RPG and a way to escape again. And they shoot the beefy man, but he doesn't explode, even though he explodes. And he falls onto a pillar, and his blood makes the umbrella symbol. And then they go to a cemetery, and he's like, "Helena, you're hired," or something. And then his thing ends. Then we go to the next campaign. Chris Redfield, Chapter 2. Uh, uh, Chris Redfield has formed a BOW fighty group because he did. And he's got a bunch of rookies. He's got peers. He's got some of the characters from Battlefield Bad Company. And they go on to fight the bad men, including Ogre Man. His name is Ogre Man. Uh, and some terrorists that are infecting themselves with drugs so that they can be terrorists more. And they do. And Chris rips Ogre Man's spine out and shoves it back in him. And then he fights a tank. And then they see Ada Wong, who's wearing blue. And she's like, "Yeah, follow me. I'll show you where the drugs are." And they do. And then she kills everyone but Piers and Chris. And then we flash forward a year or like a couple months or a year or something. And Chris is in a bar getting drunk and being mean. And Piers shows up and he's like, "This steak is good." And then Chris is like, "You're retarded." And Piers is like, "You're a drunk." And then Chris is like, "Damn." So then Piers gives him a gun and command over his troops, and they go to China. Like immediately after. Anyway, while in China, they fight some more of the terrorist men who are they they mutate and stuff. Some of their mutations include a shield arm, a knife arm, bat legs, and grasshopper legs. And there might be another one, but I forget. Anyway, they go off on this adventure, and they go in a building and fight an invisible snake. And the invisible snake kills a bunch of people, but Chris is mad at the snake, so he chases after it with Piers and a third guy. So the third guy is like, "I'll help you kill the snake." And so Chris electrocutes the snake and the third guy to death. And he's like, "Take that, snake." And they keep moving. And Piers is like, "You're a bad leader." He's like, flips him off and does a backflip. Anyway, so then they go more to China. And I don't remember much of the in between, but there's a point where they get to the terrorist people, And while fighting the terrorist people, a helicopter shows up. So they have to fight the helicopter, but the helicopter is covered in grasshopper terrorists. So they shoot the grasshopper terrorists and the helicopter, and they save Jake and Sherry Birkin in the process. But then um, I think Ada shows up or something. Uh, and then Chris is like, I hate that woman, so we have to go beat her. And so they get in a Humvee and drive super fast down the highway after just like a convertible. And they do go through like a parking garage, and then they do a sick jump into an aircraft carrier because Ada's there. I guess she did a sick jump too. I don't know. Inside the aircraft carrier, the enemies are now replaced with Black Manta, and they have a Harrier jet that they don't. That they don't. It's in the aircraft carrier, and they use it to shoot. And so Ada closes a door on Chris and Piers, and so Chris and Piers decide to go like 100 feet in, like 50 feet in the air to the scaffolding of the aircraft carrier, and use their muscles to turn a missile around to blow the door up. And you do that, and then you go through the door because that's all the giant missile blew up, and you go after Ada more, and then Ada dies. No, wait, Ada doesn't die yet, or does she? I think no, wait. This leads to a chase, and then it leads to that cutscene where Leon and Chris meet, and so they go off on more adventure in the explosive Roomba room, and then she gets shot and dies. And I might be remembering all this wrong. Anyway, Chris and Piers get a Harrier jet because Chris knows how to fight Harriers, and you would know this if you knew the extensive lore of Resident Evil, because this is true. And so they go fight a ship that has a missile on it that shoots the C virus, and Ogre Man is on that ship too. And they try to stop it, but they don't. And then China gets hit with the C virus, and they show that cutscene again. He's like, "Damn it, Leon, no!" And so they decide to go to the underground oil rig that they know exists. I don't remember how they know. They go to the underground oil rig, and it's revealed that someone has been making a giant jelly skeleton that's going to destroy the world. So they fight the. So then they stop because Pierre or Chris or Jake and Sherry is there, and Jake and Sherry's like, "Hello." And then Chris is like, "I killed your dad, Jake." And Jake's like, "You what?" And he's like, "Shoot me." And then he doesn't. And then they go to fight the jelly skeleton. And the jelly skeleton is too powerful. So Piers stabs himself with virus, and this gives him lightning arm. And then Piers fights the jelly skeleton with the lightning arm, and Piers and Chris win against the jelly skeleton. But Piers is infected, so he saves Chris by shooting him to the surface. But then the jelly skeleton shows up, so Piers becomes a lightning god and blows up the oil rig himself and the jelly skeleton with lightning. And then Chris gets picked up by a helicopter. And then he eats steak. Chapter 3, Jake's story. So Jake is like in a building because he's a mercenary and he's with the terrorist people that you've seen. But the terrorist people are taking drugs, and then Jake takes the drugs, but they don't affect him because he's special. We'll get onto that later. Anyway, he teams up with Sherry Birkin, who notices that he's immune to the drug because Ada was giving them drug, and he's immune to the drug. And Sherry wants his blood because that means it would stop the drug, so that's good. And then Jake and Sherry fight some terrorist guys, and Jake does some sick flips off of poles because he can. And they fight Ogre Man because they do. But then Ogre Man is helped by uh, Dennis the Menace with a robot arm. And they have to run from him because he's special. So they get in a helicopter after this. But then it's revealed that Dennis the Menace has hitched a ride on the friendly helicopters. So the friendly helicopters that are carrying him follow Jake and Sherry, and he does sick jumps off of each of them while they fight. And they stop him, but the helicopters all crash. And then Sherry gets a piece of metal stuck through her chest, but she's okay because she has super healing. So then they're in a blizzard, and they go, let's ride these snowmobiles so that we can go across the biggest area ever to get I think it was like data packs or something in the key or something. Then they go to a wooden cabin and they sit there, and then they wake up and the wooden cabin gets shot up by bad men, and they fight the bad men, but then they get knocked out by the one guy, and they wake up like forever later inside a hospital or a laboratory place. And then Sherry goes off on an adventure in the lab or something. But Jake wakes up and he's in an untextured white laboratory. It looks bizarre. Uh, then they team back up after staring at ass because that's how the game goes. And then they're in China, I think. I think they are. I don't remember. I played this game. Anyway, the bad guy that turned into the T Rex is their boss. But then Leon tells Sherry that the bad guy is bad, and she believes him because he saved Sherry forever ago. And that's what happened. Anyway, then they meet Leon because he crashed the plane into China, and then they fought off the Dennis the Menace with the robot arm. And then they go through China, but a man with an organic chainsaw chases them, and they fight him on a bus. And then they break into a, a really nice Chinese mansion temple thing, and a tank bursts through the door and chases them. So uh, so Jake goes, I know what to do, and they get a motorcycle and do a sick jump over the tank, and then do a sick jump over the wall, and then they get chased by a helicopter. And then this leads to some sick jumps and tricks and everything, and this leads to that part where Chris is fighting the grasshopper helicopter terrorists. And then they do that, and then Jake and Sherry um, they what the hell do they do? They keep going in China and fight the organic chainsaw man and jump from boat to boat, and then they get to the bad man that they work for, and they're like no, and he starts shooting at them, and they leave. And then they end up in an underwater oil rig, like I said before, because yeah. Um, anyway, somehow in the underwater oil rig, after doing all this, they end up in the center of the earth, and then they fight Dennis the Menace with a robot arm on an elevator, but it's exploding. The center of the earth is exploding, and they go a million miles an hour upward while fighting this guy, and then he gets shot, and then he falls off, and he gets exploded by the center of the earth, and then Jake eats an apple given to him by a kid and fights monsters. Yeah. Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is the Ada story where you play as Ada, and this will like wraps everything together because Ada was giving drugs or something with a blue sweater. Anyway, she has a cube that's a phone, and she starts in a submarine. In the submarine, she fights a bunch of bees. She mostly fights bees the entire game, and then she just kind of pops in and out through everyone's story while on the phone with the bad guy that I was talking about. And she helps everyone or does weird things. And then she meets Ada Wong, finds the VHS tapes, and it's revealed that the Ada Wong that gives drugs isn't Ada Wong. It's not Ada Wong. And it's revealed that the bad man is really in love with Ada Wong, but Ada Wong just doesn't care, so he made Ada Wong clone, and that's why virus happened. Anyway, Ada goes to the fake Ada Wong, and she's like, no, and then she gets shot and dies, but then she becomes a giant goo monster that infects a boat, so Ada shoots her and she dies. Then she helps Leon, and then she fights the beef man, and then she leaves. And then she leaves, and then she answers her phone and the game ends. This all happens in the same game. I forget what else happens. You can tell me whatever you want. I'm going to bed.